Hey everybody, Lawler here with some more Rocket League news. We've got some roster talks actually to talk about, primarily towards the focus of eUnited, and we've also got to recap what happened in week 6 of RLCSX. But before we get into that, as always, if you guys enjoyed the content, any sort of interaction on the video greatly helps, whether it be a thumbs up, making sure you leave a comment, as well as making sure to hit subscribe and turning on notifications so you don't miss out on any of the Rocket League information I provide. Also, while you're down there in the description, you can find all the links to my social media if you guys want to go show some support on Twitter, Instagram, whatever you want to do. That is also greatly appreciated. So two major roster changes to talk about. One I've already discussed pretty heavily and another one that's pretty recent. The first one is actually going to be about the Monkeys, a team that I've covered for the grid over the past couple of weeks. The Monkeys have recently been trying out in Arju, and as you guys know, as I mentioned in previous videos, they have officially committed to Arju. Taz has migrated with Cash and found a new third, but ultimately Arju is the new official one, and that actually comes with some pretty exciting results that we'll talk about in the recap later on. The other one that a lot of people have been talking about is actually with Hockser lately. If you guys don't know Hockser from eUnited, yesterday or the day before, he ended up doing some things on social media that caught the attention of a couple people. The first thing, as you can see in the image, is that he removed all of his stuff when it came to what his Twitter banner was, who he was sponsored by, basically completely cleared out his bio. He then shortly after ended up tweeting out something saying, "Hey Cloud9." And if you guys don't understand that reference, a long time ago, when Cloud9 was trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their roster, there was rumors of how Hockser was actually scrimming with Cloud9 in place of Torment and how they were looking really, really good. But because of the way that eUnited was playing, they wanted to hold on to their best player at the time, which was Hockser. So that trade didn't go through, and Hockser has made it public that Cloud9 is essentially his dream roster. That's where he wants his career to go. He would love to represent that organization. So this is kind of a throwback to that for those that aren't really sure the context of why he may have tweeted this. I did end up reaching out to eUnited and talking to them to the best of my ability, obviously without any information. And it comes with the next part where eUnited ended up tweeting as an update for the roster: "We are excited to elevate Tristn to the main roster. Most recently, Tristn was a standout collegiate player at University of Akron. In corresponding move, we'll be moving Hockser to the substitute role." So there's a lot of things to break down with this one. Initially, if you guys don't know Tristn, he is essentially the Justin of CRL. Really talented, really mechanical player, even though it is CRL and a lot of people have a negative connotation to that. Tristn is definitely a very solid player. Whether he will elevate to RLCS or not, whether he will be able to compete at that level, we do not know. We will have to wait and see. I also find this at a weird time in eUnited's roster. Most recently, you did see the guys from eUnited actually play really well in the grid. So while I was casting for V1, we actually got to play eUnited, a team that, for the most part, you did see V1 end up beating. But this previous week, eUnited looked stellar. One Mike was popping off. Everybody looked super consistent. Ajax had some really good plays, and Hockser just tied it together with a pretty bow and does what he does best with his consistency. So I personally felt like this eUnited was something that was trending in the right direction. And then you find out from what Rizzo tweeted. Rizzo ended up retweeting something from one of the eUnited members, Clerky, who, if you look way back at the RBG situation where they released Aeon, talking about how if you're actually good at your job, you should be able to develop the players who are lacking rather than doing the simple thing, which is removing them and then bringing in new talent, which is kind of the cheap way out. So Rizzo then says, well, you're doing this exact same thing now. What Rizzo's basically saying is that they're being a hypocrite. You're calling out someone in the sense of RBG for letting go of Aeon, but now you're benching Hockser rather than trying to figure out the issues and progress further, which is a little bit of a hypocritical situation. And it's even more difficult because of the pressure you put on the players. So the way that I'm looking at it from the outside perspective is eUnited plays very well in the grid. It comes to regionals, and from behind the scenes, from what rumors are, and this is not confirmed, this is nothing official, but from what people are saying and the rumors that are out there, whether it be in Reddit or from some of the pro players and their tweets. And I mean, if you look at this post from Rizzo, there's tons of people being like, what the heck is going on? Like Virtuoso being like, why would anyone say this to a player or team before competing? And what they ended up saying is, if you do not perform well in this tournament, someone is going to get benched. And I'm trying to be on both sides of it, where in the sense of, if our team is not getting results and we need to make changes, I do agree that the organization needs to say something to the players and say, hey, we need to make a change, and if it doesn't happen, we're going to make that change. But at the same time, if you are a player and your boss comes in and says, hey, if you don't play well this weekend, you're getting the yeet, I'm probably going to feel all that pressure, and I'm also going to not perform to the best of my ability. So at what point do you do this? Do you say, hey, I approach this after the situation and be like, you know what, you guys haven't performed well in 4 weeks, someone's getting benched? Or do you say, hey, I'm giving you one last chance, I need you guys to step it up, and this could implode? So again, trying to stay both sides of it, but I do agree ultimately with the players that putting this unwanted pressure is obviously going to force the players to probably play worse than where their potential is, especially after how well they played in the grid last week. Either way, the big thing you need to know, Hockser is now on the bench, and Tristn is now moving into the starting role. So it'll be Tristn, Ajax, and Wondamike, which who knows how that'll play out. It'll be interesting to see in the grid on Thursday. Now that we've got roster talks out of the way, let's switch focus into the recap portion, and we're going to kind of just rifle through these. Again, another 3 or 4 days worth of Rocket League between 2 grids for NA and EU, and then we also have the regionals starting in stage 1 for North America as well. So starting off, we're going to go in chronological order. We're starting with the NA grid for week 6. The teams that make it out of Group A is Alpine and G2, and then in the lowers is Space Station and Pittsburgh Knights. In Group C and D, you've got Omelet and Peeps in uppers, and Energy and Team Envy in lowers. And this one was weird. I was watching and doing the version 1 broadcast, like I mentioned. They go to 5 against Peeps. If you guys actually go watch the version 1 broadcast, you can see the exact moment when I look at my other monitor and see the results of Charlotte Phoenix beating Space Station Gaming and looking at the bracket, and then also seeing others like PK drop down as early as they did. North America was pretty wild this past weekend, and EU decided to try to one-up us as well, which we'll get into in just a second. But again, the big thing to note in the group stage here for grid week 6 is that out of all the teams that I consider like top 5, Peeps and G2 were the only ones that came through uppers. You're talking Space Station, Energy, and Envy all came through lowers, and Pittsburgh Knights, a team that I would probably put in that kind of 6-7 area nowadays, also finding themselves through the lowers. So you're telling me the lower teams qualifying are Space Station, Pittsburgh Knights, Energy, and Envy? That's pretty wild, because that's some like pretty dedicated top 8, almost top 4 semifinal teams. We then jump into the playoffs. Energy versus Alpine. Energy ends up winning that one 4-1. Also keep in mind that it is a clean sweep because any of the teams in the quarterfinals do get a 1-game advantage in those quarterfinals. So Energy does have 2 OTs, the first one being a very long one at 7.5 minutes, but Energy gets 4-1. Pittsburgh Knights then plays Omelet, 1-game advantage for Omelet, so Pittsburgh Knights also gets a sweep. You then jump down to Envy and G2. G2 goes all the way to 7, a super exciting match. And Envy looks like they could have had it, but G2 is able to hold out. G2 started to have the hot hand this past weekend in the grid. They looked really solid, and the Envy game was kind of just the jump start. They essentially went through the gauntlet, which we'll talk about here in a bit. And then we jump down to Peeps versus Space Station. Peeps has 1-game advantage. Space Station doesn't care. 2 OTs and a 4-0 clean sweep as well. We then get into the semifinals, and it goes to 7, Energy versus Pittsburgh Knights, and I think this is great for Pittsburgh Knights. Obviously, a team with EPS that has been trending in a really good direction, something that makes me really happy. And for them to find themselves in the semifinals, I think is a very big accomplishment for the team. So only but up here. Energy, though, a big deal for them, obviously making it back to the finals in the grid. And then G2 Space Station, this is an exciting matchup. Obviously, Jazzo and Chrome on the CJ show have a little bit of banter and some fun with this rivalry that has been created by some of the top dogs. And Jazzo, in his power rankings, put G2 at number 2. He said, hey, I'm confident with this team, and that's kind of the best thing about him as a coach, is he will always have their back. And you get to see it here. So G2 ends up making it to the grand finals, 4-2 in favor of G2, 1 OT. In a really tough fight. Space Station had a bit of a shaky day, and that did carry over into regionals, which we'll get to, but for them to find themselves still in semifinals shows how talented Space Station is. We then get to the grand finals with G2 and Energy, an exciting one at that, but G2 just the better looking team at this point. Energy did put up a couple fights, especially in that middle of the area game, but once G2 really settled into the match, they looked phenomenal. So G2 kind of had everybody's number. They made it, like I said, through the gauntlet, beating Envy, Space Station, and Energy. Not enough for me to put them obviously up super high in the power rankings, but again, they'll definitely be bumping up some spots. Next up, week 6 of the grid for Europe, and your 8 teams that make it through the group stage are Solary, BDS, Oxygen, Guild, Team Liquid, Barcelona, Monkeys, and Top Blokes. This pretty much went as expected. I had expectations that BDS was going to make it through. Solary was a big surprise. The only massive upset for me was the fact that Vitality ended up losing to Solary as well as Guild. That caught me off guard. Vitality obviously does bring it to 5 in the lowers, but There's some pretty big teams that are being left out. I think the fact that Endpoint didn't make it is a pretty big deal. Vitality didn't make it. Usually Endpoint and Vitality are the two that make it instead of Guild and Solary. So that was a pretty wild one. The other crazy thing is the fact that Monkey's now with Arju, as I talked about, now that he's the official on the roster as of last week. He also has made such a huge impact for the team in the way that they approach the game, and I recommend going and supporting the guys. But they make it into their first playoff. That's a really big deal for the Monkeys. Obviously, them and Chalked have been kind of fighting that lowest seed. And for the Monkeys to make it top 8, I think is a really big deal. And as much as I love Taz and what he was trying to do for that team, Arju has seemed to fit what they're trying to accomplish a little bit better. So I'm glad to see Monkeys trying to make those improvements before it's too late. You then go into the lowers where Libertas tries to put up a fight against Barcelona, who still, again, consistently makes it into the top. And then Triple Trouble dropping to Team Liquid. Team Liquid also starting to get their stride. We then go to the playoffs. BDS over Liquid 4-3. That one-game advantage coming in clutch for BDS. Solary versus Barcelona. Solary does get the one-game advantage, but Barcelona ends up squeaking out the last 3 really good games. That Barcelona-Solary series was really good. Top looks ended up completely sweeping Guild. And then Monkeys versus Oxygen. Monkeys looked like they could have had a chance as they start to get a win here towards the tail end of the series. And then Oxygen's like, no, we're going to sink our feet in. This is the grid. This is our house. And they put up a pretty good fight. We then go into the semifinals, and Barcelona and Top Blokes both sweep their competition. 4-0 for BDS over Barcelona, Top Blokes 4-0 over Oxygen, and I think this is something really exciting starting to develop. Top Blokes was playing with Casio, not on his home setup, with really bad ping, and they still take BDS to 7 in the grand finals. BDS, a very talented team. It came down to 1 goal, if I remember correctly. At 0 seconds, it was 1 apiece, and then BDS scored last second. As much as it sucks for Top Blokes to be that close again, the fact that they go to the place that they do, Casio not able to play in his home setup because he's on vacation, I think it was. But the fact that they perform as well as they do and things go as well as they do, number 1, BDS able to win in the grid as well. BDS has not had grid results. They show up here. Number 2, Top Blokes, super consistent results across the board. Looking like they're trying to push into that top 3, looking like a really solid team. So really happy about the results and what's going on with Europe towards the top. And last but not least, for RLCS Season X, we had the North American Regional 2 go down with Stage 1. So we're taking our top 32 teams and getting our top 16 going into next week. If you take a look at the list, you can see those 16 teams. The Peeps, Kansas City Pioneers, Rogue, Space Station Gaming, G2 Esports, Continuum, XSET, and Plot Twist are coming from Group A. And over in Group B, Energy, Nefarious, Alpine, Frontline, Envy, Pittsburgh Knights, Adept, and Jamal Jabari. Trying to point out notable ones. The biggest one, in my opinion, is probably going to have to be Kansas City Pioneers. They ended up 3-0ing their competition convincingly, but going up against the likes of teams like G2 as well as Space Station Gaming and winning both, I think, is a pretty big mention. Rogue does get wins over Plot Twist and Version 1. Space Station takes the loss to Kansas City Pioneers, but does have wins over eUnited and XSET, and kind of a mixture here and there. Obviously, next week is going to have more of those high-profile matches. Looking over at Group E as well, Energy 3-0s, Nefarious 3-0s. Nefarious, obviously the big surprise here with a win over Jamal Jabari, Pittsburgh Knights, as well as Envy. I think that's the biggest shock, and I want to give credit as well to Alpine as they take wins over Jamal Jabari, Crimson Wings, as well as Pittsburgh Knights. The big surprise was that Sonics did not qualify, a team that has shown consistent results towards the top 8, or at least very close to the top 8. But the fact that they don't make top 16 is actually really surprising here in regionals, with losses coming from Energy, Frontline, and Adept. So obviously some pretty exciting matches and a lot of Rocket League this weekend, and if you want to follow along in detail to all the brackets, you can find links to those down in the description for each individual event. If you guys have any more questions in regards to the roster situation or other stuff coming up, let me know in the comments down below and I'll do my best to answer those. But with that said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and we'll catch you next time. Peace.